So some time ago, we all decided here in the United States that tobacco and alcohol were bad things. They were hurting people, they were hurting our country, and so we raised the tax on them. We didn't want to make them illegal, but we make them a little more expensive, and sure enough, the consumption of tobacco, I'm not sure about alcohol, but I believe it went down. Tobacco certainly went down as a consequence of taxes. Well, why not apply that to meat? Germany is actually considering this right now. Right now, their tax on meat is 7%. They're considering raising that to 19%. Sweden and Denmark are looking at the same thing. There's a whole bunch of positive benefits to this. Number one, producing meat is the second or third largest, depending on whether you break it out from all the rest of agriculture or not, second or third largest cause or source of greenhouse gases in the world. Number two, if you have a country with a national health care system like Germany, Denmark, and Sweden have, and you can reduce the amount of meat people are eating, you reduce the number of heart attacks, strokes, cancer, heart disease cases, all the negative outcomes that are associated with eating meat. And number three, you're reducing the cost of your food supply. Meat is much more expensive to produce and much harder on the land and the water supplies and things. You're reducing the cost of the food that's being produced, which means that people have more disposable income, and the country essentially gets richer. So the UN, the IPCC, just came out with a report a few weeks ago pointing out that land use around intensive agriculture and animal agriculture is one of the principal challenges that the world is facing with regard to greenhouse gases. This is something that we could do here in the United States, and frankly, I think we should. PETA and other groups, the Farm Animal Investment Risk and Return Group, have said, this is quite likely to happen in Germany, Denmark, and Sweden, and wouldn't it be a great thing here in the United States? The average American consumes 200 pounds of meat a year, which is pretty mind-boggling when you think of it. I mean, that's more than a half a pound of meat a day. If you were to cut that in half, now, raising the tax or putting a 20%, 19% tax on it will probably only reduce consumption by 10 or 20%. But if you were to even cut it in half, you'd see a noticeable increase in the health of people all around the country, and a reduction in obesity and cancer and heart attacks and strokes and all these other things. The one argument against this that I've heard so far is that it's going to impact low-income communities by making their food more expensive. But if they shift their diet, like we're assuming everybody else will, to more plant-based products and less meat, they'll actually save money. They'll actually get healthier. And so, kind of blows up that whole argument about this is going to hurt low-income communities. It's actually going to help low-income communities. So, like alcohol and tobacco, we want to reduce the consumption of them. We increase the tax. Let's do it with meat. It's the good, the bad, and the very numerously ugly, the good. Hasbro. The Associated Press is reporting that the creator of Monopoly, Scrabble, and Operation is going to ditch their plastic packaging by 2022. This move means that games like Monopoly, Scrabble, and Operation will not use shrink wrap, window sheets, plastic bags, or elastic bands. Brian Goldner, chairman and CEO of Hasbro, says, quote, "Removing plastic from our packaging is the latest advancement in our more than decade-long journey to create a more sustainable future for our business and our world," end quote. Since plastic is killing more than 1.1 million seabirds and animals every year, and the average human eats 70,000 microplastic pieces every year, this is a step in the right direction for any business. The bad, President Jair Bolsonaro. Just recently, Bolsonaro suggested eating less food and therefore defecating less is the answer to some of the world's problems. Really? I mean, in a very Trumpian way, Bolsonaro, who has come under fire in recent weeks after data showed increased deforestation of the Amazon rainforest, which are on fire right now, Bolsonaro offered the response to a reporter who questioned if it was possible to boost the economy, feed those who are hungry, and save the environment at the same time. Bolsonaro said, "It's enough to eat a little less. You talk about environmental pollution. It's enough to poop every other day. That will be better for the whole world." Right. This new motto could be poop less and save the world. I don't know what to say other than that that's really bad. And the very, very ugly, meet Fox So-Called News' newest favorite climate misinformer, Mandy Gunnesakara. Since February, Gunnesakara has appeared at least 18 times on both Fox News and Fox Business to talk about her past work with the Trump administration. She promotes his energy agenda. She criticizes the Democratic presidential candidates. On her February 20th Fox News op-ed, Gunnesakara blasted Green New Deal, saying it reads like Karl Marx's Christmas list. Her views on climate change align with those in the Trump administration, of course, an administration that's full of climate deniers and staffed by fossil fuel industry shills. Gunnesakara is nothing more than a propaganda mouthpiece for the Trump administration and the fossil fuel industry, and that is very, very ugly. With us today is Lori Ann Burd. Lori Ann is the Environmental Health Program Director and a senior attorney with the senior attorney with the Center for Biological Diversity. Biologicaldiversity.org is the website, and the Twitter handle is Center for BioDiv and LORIANNBURD. Lori Ann, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much for having me.
I really appreciate your joining us. I understand that you all, the Center for Food Safety and the Center for Biological Diversity, are suing the Trump administration over this decision in July to approve the use of, is it sulfoxaflor?
That's right, sulfoxaflor.
So tell us about this.
Well, sulfoxaflor is a new insecticide. Well, it's newly approved for use on 200 million acres of crops in the United States. It's essentially in the same class of pesticide as the neonicotinoid insecticides that have become notorious for their role in worldwide bee declines. It is classified by the U.S. EPA as very highly toxic to bees.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And the bee population, according to the Agriculture Department, I saw it had dropped from 6 million bee hives in the United States in 1947 to 2.5 million in 2008. But we had a 40% loss last year. I mean, where are we at right now in terms of the health of our bee population, particularly our pollinator, or, our honeybees?
Our honeybees are not doing well. Like you said, there was a 40% loss, winter loss this past year, which is a very high loss rate, the highest that we've had in the 13 years that U.S. beekeepers have been tracking these losses. So it's very significant. In addition, we know that we're in the midst of an insect, what researchers have called an insect apocalypse, where we're seeing extremely high rates of declines for insects across the world and including in the United States, and pollinators are especially imperiled because they come into contact with insecticides.
Now, your lawsuit, which was filed in the Ninth Circuit, argues, if I have this right, that under FIFRA, is it pronounced, Federal Insecticide?
That's right, yeah.
The Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, you're asserting that the EPA, the Trump Environmental Protection Agency, in authorizing the use of this insecticide, failed to comply with the substantial evidence requirement of that law. You want to explain that to us?
Well, FIFRA, it's not an amazing law to be working under. It gives a lot of deference to the EPA, which in these times is a highly problematic thing. But it does require substantial evidence to support the decision. In this case, all of the studies on bees really point to the conclusion that sulfoxaflor is simply too dangerous to be used on a large scale in the environment, and nonetheless, the EPA decided to approve it anyway. Like I mentioned, they themselves describe it as very highly toxic to bees, which is the highest degree of toxicity possible, and still they said this was safe to use for bees, which was, of course, basically nonsensical. And while they did do some study of impacts on honeybees, they actually waived the requirement for a full field study. It's a legal requirement that the pesticide registrant look at the impacts of its product in a full field study, and they said that they didn't think it would substantially change their mind. So they basically said that the decision to approve sulfoxaflor was a foregone conclusion.
That's remarkable. Now, I understand also that in coming to this determination, they used studies by Dow, which is the manufacturer of this pesticide?
That's right. When pesticides are approved, the EPA relies very heavily on the studies submitted by the registrant.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example. In this instance, they didn't even have, they didn't do any studies on the vast majority of our native bees, which are solitary and ground nesting, but there were 2 studies on native bees that were focused on bumblebees. One of them was published in the esteemed scientific journal Nature. It was a peer-reviewed study, and it found that even low doses of sulfoxaflor have severe consequences for bumblebee reproductive success. However, the EPA discarded that study because it didn't follow the good laboratory practices that they've set up for industry studies. And those studies are in recognition of the fact that industry has a pretty high incentive to try to promote its product. And so they set up certain mechanisms to try to make their studies a little bit more fair. However, there was one study that industry did do on bumblebees, and that was, again, the registrant was Dow, and their own study found that the level of sulfoxaflor considered safe for bumblebees to consume is 5 times lower than the dose that EPA had considered safe for honeybees. So even industry's own studies are finding that this stuff is extremely dangerous for bees.
And yet the Trump administration is saying, oh, just fine with us. In fact, I understand that they have announced that they're going to stop gathering data on the declining honeybee populations. Is this true?
That's true, and they made that decision just 2 weeks before they released their decision to approve sulfoxaflor.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. Well, keep us up to date on how the lawsuit is going, will you please?
We will, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Lori Ann Burd, with the Environmental Health Program Director and Senior Attorney at the Center for Biological Diversity. Thank you, Lori Ann.
Thank you.
Our science fact is 74,000. Back in 2013, Brazil started measuring, through their space agency, started measuring the number of forest fires in the Amazon. And that number has been climbing every year. This year it hit 74,000 across the Amazon, which is a truly horrific number, in part because President Bolsonaro has said he is pro-development. So go ahead and chop down parts of the Amazon or even burn parts of it if that's what you need to do to clear land for agricultural or other uses.